Welcome to Scary Plugin, where every whisper hides a story, and every story hides a truth. 13 tales, one darkness connecting them all. Don't look away, it's already started. The first time I heard it, it was late afternoon, the kind of heat-heavy day where the forest feels alive but tired. My boots crunched over gravel and dry leaves, and the air smelled like rain that never came. Then from somewhere off the trail I heard it. Help me. It was faint, but clear, drawn out, desperate, almost too human to mistake for an animal. I stopped walking. Did you hear that? I asked my supervisor, who was about 10 steps ahead on the trail. He didn't even look back. Ignore it. That threw me off. His voice wasn't annoyed. It was clipped, practiced, like he'd said those exact words before. But what if someone's... Don't, he cut in, not slowing his pace. Someone went missing here back in the 60s. Never found. People hear that voice all the time. It's not real. I half laughed, waiting for a grin, a hint that he was joking. But he didn't even turn around. His face stayed flat, empty, as if the forest had drained the emotion out of him. I followed, glancing over my shoulder more than once. The voice didn't call again, but it stuck in my head, that distant, hollow tone, like it was both close and far at the same time. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time the wind moved through the trees outside my cabin, I thought I heard it again, soft, pleading, buried in the rustle of leaves. Over the next few months I heard it twice more. Each time it was exactly the same. Same tone, same tired rhythm. The voice never got louder, no matter how close I moved toward where it came from. It was like the sound existed in a fixed spot in the air, floating. The third time I decided I had to know. It was dusk and the woods were unnaturally quiet. No birds, no crickets, not even the wind. When it came again, help me. I stepped off the trail and followed the sound. The deeper I went, the stranger the air felt. The silence thickened, pressing against my ears like static. I turned on my flashlight, but it barely cut through the darkness. The voice came again, right behind me this time. Help me. I spun around, light shaking in my hands. No one was there. The ground beneath me felt soft, not like dirt but hollow. When I crouched down, the beam caught something half buried in the soil, a scrap of faded red cloth, maybe from a shirt, and something else beside it, an old metal tag with the words, Black Ridge Survey 1963 etched into it. I pocketed the tag and ran. When I got back, my supervisor was waiting outside the ranger station like he knew. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just looked at the dirt on my boots and said quietly, "You shouldn't have followed it." I tried to ask him what he meant, but he walked away before I could say another word. That night, I woke up to whispering right outside my cabin window. It wasn't a voice this time, not exactly. More like breathing, uneven and raspy, circling the cabin walls. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it out the window. The woods were still, but something moved between the trees, a faint shimmer, like heat rippling off asphalt. And then I heard it again, closer than ever. Help me. The sound came from inside the cabin. The next morning, I found muddy footprints by the door, bare, human-shaped, leading from the woods right up to the porch. And stopping there, no return prints. When I told my supervisor, he finally looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You heard it again, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed, rubbing his face. That's how it starts. He didn't explain what it was, but the way his eyes darted toward the tree line told me enough. He'd heard it too. That was months ago. I still hear it sometimes, usually just before it rains. The voice never changes. Same tone, same words, always near the edge of hearing, like it's waiting for me to answer. And part of me thinks, maybe if I do, I'll finally understand what's been calling from the trees. Or maybe I'll never come back. When my father was stationed in Alwis, Rajasthan, he used to tell me strange stories about the blue bulls, nilgai, as the locals called them. He was there in the late 1980s, part of an archaeological team digging near an abandoned temple. The villagers warned him that the temple was cursed, a place where the forest remembers the dead. He used to laugh at that phrase, until the day he stopped. He told me once, just before he died, that there was something in that forest, something that followed him home. At the time, I thought it was the ramblings of a man who'd spent too long alone in the sun. But now, living here in Ranger, Georgia, I've started to think maybe he wasn't imagining things. The night it began, I was on the porch of my cabin, the one that faces the thickest part of the woods. The trees up here are old, so old they twist into shapes that barely look natural anymore. I was staring at the tree line when I saw movement. At first I thought it was deer. Then the light from the porch flickered and I saw their color. Blue-gray hides, thin, tall frames. There were 5 of them. They weren't grazing. They were circling something on the ground. The memory hit me like a punch. My father's voice years ago, telling me about the nilgai that weren't truly animals. When they find the restless dead, he'd said, they circle. They move until the spirit is ready to leave. And if they see you watching, they remember your face. I blinked, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Georgia doesn't have nilgai. They shouldn't exist here. When I looked again, they were gone. Just the woods, silent and still. The next morning I went down to where they'd been. The dirt was freshly disturbed, soft like something had been dug up. There were no hoofprints, no animal tracks, but buried halfway in the soil was a small metal tag, rusted and worn. It read Black Ridge Survey 1963. That's when I realized I'd seen that same number before, online, in an old missing persons report from the Ranger County Archives. A man named David Lang went missing that year while surveying land for a logging company. They never found a body, just a campsite and his tools scattered near a dried creek bed. I kept the tag. I shouldn't have. That night, I woke to a low rumble outside the cabin. Not thunder, but hooves. Heavy, steady, circling the cabin over and over. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then, through the thin walls, I heard it. The same voice that Ranger talked about in his video. A whisper, dragged and tired, floating through the dark. Help me. I froze. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from under the floorboards. I grabbed a flashlight and looked down through the cracks in the wood. For a moment I saw movement, something pale shifting in the dirt below the cabin. The sound of hooves grew louder. I backed toward the door, ready to run, when the lights flickered. The air grew thick with that same heavy silence, the kind that presses against your chest. Then, in one last flash of light, I saw them again. The blue-gray shapes standing at the edge of the trees, perfectly still, watching, waiting. In the morning, the ground beneath the cabin looked disturbed, circular, like something had walked in slow, deliberate steps. I left that day. But even now, weeks later, I still dream about them, about the way they moved, how they circled as if marking the boundary between life and something else. My father once said the nilgai don't just guide the dead, they collect them. And now I think the thing he found in Alwis followed him here. Maybe that's why people vanish on Black Ridge Mountain. Maybe that's what the rangers keep hearing in the trees. Whatever it is, it's old. Older than the forest, older than any name we've given it. And it remembers faces. The cabin in Ranger was supposed to be peaceful. That's what everyone said when we booked it. A secluded retreat in the Georgia mountains, surrounded by quiet woods and endless stars. No neighbors, no cell service, no noise, just us and nature. For the first few nights, it actually was perfect. My boyfriend and I would sit on the front deck, drinking cheap wine while the fireflies blinked across the trees. The forest hummed with crickets, the air smelled like pine, and for the first time in months I felt calm. But everything changed on the 5th night. That evening the air was heavier than usual. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the woods looked darker than I'd ever seen them. We sat outside anyway, but after a while, I realized the forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no wind, just stillness. Then out of nowhere this wave of dread hit me. No reason, no sound. Just this primal certainty that something was wrong. My skin prickled, and my heart started pounding like I was being watched. I tried to laugh it off, but when I looked at my boyfriend, his face told me everything. He felt it too. "I don't like this," he whispered. "Something's off." Before I could answer, a scream tore through the woods. High-pitched, drawn-out, blood-curdling. We both jumped to our feet. The sound echoed and bounced off the trees until I couldn't tell where it was coming from. My first thought was that someone was hurt, but there was no way anyone else was out there that late. My boyfriend grabbed the flashlight, his hand shaking as he scanned the darkness. The beam cut through the trees, landing on something gray darting between the trunks. It was small, low to the ground, and fast. When it finally stopped long enough for us to see it, we realized it was just a fox. A gray fox shrieking. The relief that hit me almost made me laugh. But then I noticed the fox's body language. Its tail tucked, ears flat, head low. It was terrified. And that scream? Foxes don't usually make that sound unless it's mating season or they're in danger. But this was June, way out of season. The fox bolted into the woods, its cry fading into the distance. And just like that, the silence returned. We went back inside, locking the door, though neither of us slept much that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps above us. Slow, deliberate steps moving across the roof. My boyfriend sat up, wide-eyed. "You hear that?" We listened. The steps moved from one side of the cabin to the other, then stopped directly above our room. The wood creaked like something heavy was crouching there. And then, tapping. 3 slow taps on the ceiling. We waited for it to happen again. It didn't. At sunrise, we climbed out onto the roof from the upstairs window, expecting maybe to see raccoon prints or branches. But the surface was completely clean. No mud, no marks, nothing. Just a thin layer of dew. That's when I noticed something strange near the edge of the roof. There were small piles of rocks, 3 of them, each made of 3 stones stacked neatly on top of each other. They weren't there the day before. Something about them made me feel sick. It reminded me of an old story I'd read online about a forest survey team that found little rock stacks outside their tents, each one right beside the zipper. The same week that team disappeared, there were reports of faint singing in the woods near Roy, Washington. The same eerie pattern that always seemed to follow those who encountered something ancient. I tried to brush it off as coincidence, but part of me knew better. The next night, we left the cabin early. Neither of us said a word on the drive down the mountain, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lived in those woods didn't want us there, and worse, it might have followed us when we left. A week later, my boyfriend texted me a picture from his backyard. In the photo, on his porch, sat a small stack of 3 rocks. I haven't been back to Ranger since, but sometimes, late at night, when the world goes silent, I think I can hear it again. That soft, tired voice drifting through the trees. "Help me." The cabin in Ranger was supposed to be peaceful. That's what everyone said when we booked it. A secluded retreat in the Georgia mountains, surrounded by quiet woods and endless stars. No neighbors, no cell service, no noise, just us and nature. For the first few nights, it actually was perfect. My boyfriend and I would sit on the front deck, drinking cheap wine while the fireflies blinked across the trees. The forest hummed with crickets, the air smelled like pine, and for the first time in months I felt calm. But everything changed on the 5th night. That evening the air was heavier than usual. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the woods looked darker than I'd ever seen them. We sat outside anyway, but after a while, I realized the forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no wind, just stillness. Then out of nowhere, this wave of dread hit me. No reason, no sound, just this primal certainty that something was wrong. My skin prickled, and my heart started pounding like I was being watched. I tried to laugh it off, but when I looked at my boyfriend, his face told me everything. He felt it too. I don't like this, he whispered. Something's off. Before I could answer, a scream tore through the woods. High-pitched, drawn-out, blood-curdling. We both jumped to our feet. The sound echoed and bounced off the trees until I couldn't tell where it was coming from. My first thought was that someone was hurt, but there was no way anyone else was out there that late. My boyfriend grabbed the flashlight, his hand shaking as he scanned the darkness. The beam cut through the trees, landing on something gray darting between the trunks. It was small, low to the ground, and fast. When it finally stopped long enough for us to see it, we realized it was just a fox. A gray fox shrieking. The relief that hit me almost made me laugh. But then I noticed the fox's body language. Its tail tucked, ears flat, head low. It was terrified. And that scream? Foxes don't usually make that sound unless it's mating season or they're in danger. But this was June, way out of season. The fox bolted into the woods, its cry fading into the distance. And just like that, the silence returned. We went back inside, locking the door, though neither of us slept much that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps above us. Slow, deliberate steps moving across the roof. My boyfriend sat up, wide-eyed. "You hear that?" We listened. The steps moved from one side of the cabin to the other, then stopped directly above our room. The wood creaked like something heavy was crouching there. And then, tapping. 3 slow taps on the ceiling. We waited for it to happen again. It didn't. At sunrise, we climbed out onto the roof from the upstairs window, expecting maybe to see raccoon prints or branches. But the surface was completely clean. No mud, no marks, nothing. Just a thin layer of dew. That's when I noticed something strange near the edge of the roof. There were small piles of rocks, 3 of them, each made of 3 stones stacked neatly on top of each other. They weren't there the day before. Something about them made me feel sick. It reminded me of an old story I'd read online about a forest survey team that found little rock stacks outside their tents, each one right beside the zipper. The same week that team disappeared, there were reports of faint singing in the woods near Roy, Washington. The same eerie pattern that always seemed to follow those who encountered something ancient. I tried to brush it off as coincidence, but part of me knew better. The next night, we left the cabin early. Neither of us said a word on the drive down the mountain, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lived in those woods didn't want us there, and worse, it might have followed us when we left. A week later, my boyfriend texted me a picture from his backyard. In the photo, on his porch, sat a small stack of 3 rocks. I haven't been back to Ranger since, but sometimes, late at night, when the world goes silent, I think I can hear it again. That soft, tired voice drifting through the trees. "Help me." They warned me not to go up there. The Forest Service, the locals, even my own brother. But after reading about David Lang's journal and what the Rangers found near the old fire tower, I couldn't let it go. I had to see for myself. I'm a geology grad student from Atlanta. My thesis is about subsurface, acoustics, how underground vibrations can indicate structural voids. When I heard the ranger describe the ground collapsing from below, my academic brain lit up. A sinkhole, maybe. Cavern formation. Easy explanation. That's what I told myself when I packed my recording gear and headed up to Black Ridge. The trail was abandoned. No recent footprints, no maintenance. Even the air felt different, heavier, like something old lived in it. It was late afternoon when I reached the clearing where the fire tower had stood. The circle in the dirt was still there, just as the report described. Perfect. Smooth, not a single weed breaking through. I set my ground, mic in the center, and switched on the recorder. Static, then a faint thump, rhythmic, almost like footsteps. No, not footsteps, hooves. I adjusted the sensitivity and leaned closer. That's when I noticed it. The same 3 small rocks stacked neatly by my bag. I hadn't seen them there when I set up. The hair on my arms stood straight up. I turned, scanning the tree line. The woods were silent. Even the usual mountain breeze felt smothered. Then, the sound. A whisper that didn't come through the mic, but from the ground itself. Like a vibration turning into a voice. Help me. I froze. I knew about the stories, the voice the rangers heard, the ones locals dismissed as legend. But hearing it directly beneath me was something else entirely. I should have packed up and left. But instead I dug. My trowel hit stone within a minute. Not rock, carved stone. Smooth, circular, arranged in a spiral pattern. I brushed the dirt away until I could see what looked like a narrow shaft leading down into the dark. At the bottom was a faint blue light. That was all the invitation I needed. Or maybe all it wanted. I lowered my flashlight, climbing gear attached, and began my descent. The tunnel walls were slick with condensation, and the deeper I went, the warmer it got. About 20 feet down, the spiral opened into a hollow chamber, roughly the size of a small room. That's where I saw them. Stone figures half buried in the earth. Human shapes frozen mid-step, their faces smoothed over like melting wax. Around them were scattered bones, animal, maybe human, and carved symbols in the dirt. Circles, spirals, and something that looked eerily like a bull's skull. The blue light came from the center, where a pool of still water shimmered faintly, glowing from beneath. I crouched closer. The hum grew louder, the same tone from the recording. It vibrated through my chest. When I leaned over the pool, I saw something move beneath the surface. Not fish, not reflection. It was a face, not mine. Its mouth opened, and the voice that came out wasn't through air. It came through me. Help me. I stumbled back, hitting one of the statues. It cracked at the shoulder and something poured out. Not dust, not stone, ash, fine and black like burnt bone. The ground started to shake. The statues around me trembled, then tilted slightly as if waking up. I ran, climbed up the shaft, scraping my arms and legs raw, and pulled myself out just as the soil shifted behind me. The spiral collapsed in, sealing itself shut. When I looked back, the circle in the dirt was gone, completely smooth again. My recorder was still running. I played it back later that night in my motel. Most of it was static except for one section, right after the whisper. It wasn't help me anymore. It was something else. Help us. The next day I emailed my data to a professor I trust, Dr. Adley, from the University of North Georgia. She called me that night, voice shaky. You said you recorded the sound at Black Ridge, right? Yeah, why? She hesitated. I compared your waveform to seismic data from that area. There's a pattern repeating every few months, and it's growing louder. It's not tectonic. It's organic. Organic? Like animal movement? No, she said quietly. Like something alive. Under the mountain. Most folks in Ranger, Georgia don't talk about the mountain anymore. Not since the disappearances, but every once in a while, a curious face shows up. Some YouTuber, a grad student, or a weekend explorer who thinks they can uncover the mystery of Black Ridge. That's when I usually find them first. Name's Earl Weller, though around here they call me Old Man Weller. Been living at the base of Black Ridge since the 1970s, long enough to know what's safe to say and what ain't. A week ago, a kid came by, maybe mid-20s, smart type, carrying more equipment than sense. Said he was studying the geology of the mountain. I knew right away he was lying, or maybe he didn't even realize it. That's what the mountain does. It pulls you in with half-truths. He asked if I'd ever heard of a hollow path. I damn near slammed the door in his face. See, that name ain't from locals. It's from before the town even existed. My granddad used to whisper about it when I was a boy. How the Cherokee refused to step foot near that ridge. They called it the ground that breathes. Said there was something below it, something that listens when you speak its name. I told the kid to turn back. He didn't listen. None of them do. That night, around 2 a.m., I heard movement outside, soft steps through dry leaves. I grabbed my lantern and rifle and looked out the window. Nothing. Then the sound came again, this time from behind me. But I was still alone. I stepped onto the porch, and the light from the lantern flickered, then dimmed completely. I swear the dark got thicker, like smoke filling the air. Then I heard it, that low hum. The same one that shook my bones when I was a child. The one that starts under your feet before crawling up your spine. I muttered a prayer. The one my granddad taught me. Earth below, keep still. The hum stopped, but when I turned to go back inside, there he was, that same kid, standing at the edge of the yard, covered in dirt and shaking. He looked hollowed out. His eyes were open, but he wasn't really there. I brought him in, sat him by the fire, poured him a drink. After a few minutes, he started mumbling. Something about voices under the ground, stone figures and blue light. I didn't want to believe it, but every word he said lined up with what I'd heard decades ago. Back then, I worked for the county. When they tried to build a logging road through that part of the ridge, they brought in machines, drilled, blasted. By the second week, we started losing people. Not like accidents, they just vanished. The last day, the ground opened up beneath our bulldozer. The driver went down with it. No scream, no crash, no dust, just gone. We sealed the area and marked it unstable terrain, but I know better. It wasn't unstable and it was hungry. The kid wouldn't stop shaking. He kept whispering, "It's awake now." Then, right as dawn broke, he stood up and walked out the door without saying a word. I called after him, but he didn't turn. That's when I saw the mark on the back of his neck, a faint, spiraled burn, same shape as the carvings we used to find near the ridge. He walked straight toward the tree line. I followed him until I couldn't see through the fog anymore. I haven't seen him since. Yesterday, the sheriff came by asking about missing hikers again. I told him the same thing I tell everyone. The mountain keeps what it wants. But last night, I found something at the edge of my yard, a small stack of 3 rocks, perfectly balanced. Beside it, my front door was open, and on the table sat my old field radio. The dial was turning on its own, cycling through static until it hit one clear frequency. A voice came through, faint, distant, but familiar. "Mr. Weller, help us. The sheriff said the student never made it back to town. But if you ask me, he didn't leave the mountain. Nobody ever really does." I've been working the night shift at the Ranger County Sheriff's Dispatch Center for 6 years. Most nights are quiet, a few noise complaints, the occasional drunk driver, maybe a coyote sighting that someone mistakes for a mountain lion. But 3 nights ago, something started coming through our radio frequency, and I still can't explain what I heard. It was 1:47 a.m. when the static began. At first, I thought it was interference from the storm rolling in over Black Ridge. The power flickered, then came back, and the radio crackled to life. The transmission wasn't from any of our patrol cars. Our system logs every active unit. But this one came through on a blank channel. No ID, no coordinates. The voice that followed was quiet, breathless. "Mr. Weller, help us." I froze. I'd heard that name before. Old Man Weller, the local hermit who lived near the base of the ridge. The sheriff always said he was harmless, just a lonely guy who liked to scare hikers with ghost stories. But the tone of that voice didn't sound like any prank. Before I could respond, another sound faded in, like footsteps on gravel, followed by distant breathing. Then the same voice again, this time slower, strained. "Under the ground. It's hollow." The signal cut off. A few seconds later, our emergency line rang. It was Sheriff Dalton. "Did you just get a call on the radio?" he asked. I told him yes, but when I tried to play back the recording, the file was empty, like it had never been transmitted. The sheriff cursed under his breath and said, "Weller called me earlier tonight. Said he found something outside his cabin. I'm heading up there to check it out." That was the last time I heard from him. Around 3 a.m., the radio flickered again. Same channel, same static, but this time, the voice was different, deeper, slower, almost like it was being played backward. I could barely make out the words, but it sounded like, "The mountain remembers. And underneath that, a faint rhythm, not static, not footsteps, and more like something knocking. 3 times. Then silence. By dawn, I'd had enough. I called neighboring counties, asked if they were picking up anything strange on their frequencies. 2 dispatchers said yes, a garbled transmission, repeating the same coordinates over and over. 34,548 de Grain, 24,555 W. That's the base of Black Ridge. The sheriff's SUV was found there the next day. Doors wide open, radio still on, but no one inside. We sent a search team. One of them came back shaking, pale as a ghost. He said the trees were burned in a perfect circle, like lightning had struck, but the soil underneath was untouched. Later that night, the transmission came back, on every police frequency across the state. But now it wasn't just one voice. It was many, men, women, some screaming, some whispering, all saying the same phrase in unison. Do not answer. It listens. Then, buried deep under the static, a sound rose that made every hair on my body stand up. The low, guttural groan of something massive shifting beneath the ground. The next morning, all our communication lines went down. Even satellite. We could still hear local chatter, but nothing beyond the county borders. That was 3 days ago. Last night, while I was alone in the dispatch center, the radio clicked on again. No static this time, just silence followed by slow breathing. Then, clear as day, I heard the sheriff's voice. Dispatch, this is Dalton. We found the hollow path. I wanted to answer, but I remembered the warning. My hand hovered over the mic. Then I heard another voice behind him, something distorted, like a child speaking through a broken speaker. Say it back. The line went dead. I shut everything off after that. Power, lights, all of it. I sat there in the dark until sunrise, just listening to the wind outside the windows. This morning, I found muddy footprints on the dispatch room floor, too large to be human. The dirt was wet, like it had just come from the forest. And right there, written in the dust across the console, were 3 words. It heard you. I run a small YouTube channel called Scary Plugin, mostly urban exploration, haunted buildings, abandoned churches, that kind of stuff. But last month I started getting comments under my videos saying, go to Black Ridge Mountain. People are disappearing there. At first I thought it was a joke. Then I found a clip posted by a police scanner channel, so recording full of static and voices. One word came through clear as day. Weller. I decided to go. It took 5 hours to drive to Ranger, Georgia. The whole town felt half abandoned. Gas stations closed. For sale signs on every other house. When I asked the clerk at a diner about the mountain, she froze mid-sentence and whispered, "You don't go up there after dark." I laughed it off. Big mistake. By sunset, I'd set up my cameras at the base of the trail, just a few miles from where the sheriff's SUV had been found. The air smelled like rain and metal. Even though the forest was silent, my audio meter kept spiking, like it was picking up a low hum, something just below human hearing. I started rolling. "All right, guys," I said to the camera. "It's just after 9 p.m. and I'm heading into Black Ridge Forest. Locals say weird radio signals come from here," and I stopped mid-sentence. Somewhere behind me I heard a sound, not footsteps, not branches snapping. It was a slow dragging, like someone pulling a shovel through gravel. When I swung the camera around, there was nothing there. But my playback monitor flickered, and for a split second, I saw something. A pale figure standing between the trees. Too tall, no face. I thought it was lens flare until I checked the other 2 cameras. They caught the same thing. Still frames show it clearer. Something humanoid, but wrong. Its arms too long, its head tilted like it was listening. The moment I turned my flashlight on it, everything went black. The camera battery drained instantly. The backup too. Even my phone died. The forest was pitch dark. I could barely breathe. I kept walking, trying to find the trail again, when I noticed the air felt thicker, like fog, but heavier. My boots sank into the ground, soft and warm like mud, only it wasn't mud. It was breathing. I heard it under my feet, a faint rhythm, like a heartbeat coming from deep below. That's when I saw lights flickering ahead, 3 lanterns swinging slowly. I thought maybe it was a search team. I ran toward them, calling out. They didn't answer. When I got close enough to see, I froze. The lanterns weren't held by people. They were hanging from branches, swaying with no wind. Beneath them were rocks stacked in strange, perfect spirals. The same pattern carved into the sheriff's SUV door. The ground trembled, and I heard it again. That dragging sound, closer this time. I aimed my last working camera toward the noise and hit record. Something moved between the trees. Dozens of shapes, pale and thin, their heads twitching like they were trying to remember how to move. I ran. I didn't stop until I saw the road again. When I reached my car, everything went silent. No wind, no bugs, nothing. I left that night. When I got home, I checked the footage. Most of it was static and darkness, but one frame made my blood run cold. It was my face, recorded from just a few feet away. I wasn't holding the camera, and behind me, in the corner of the shot, something was watching. A shape tall enough to fill the doorway, eyes glowing faint blue. When I zoomed in, I noticed something carved into the wood next to where I stood. The same words that appeared on Weller's radio. It heard you. I tried uploading the footage, but YouTube wouldn't process it. The file corrupted instantly. I checked the metadata and found it had been last modified after I left the mountain by someone named Dispatch. The deeper we dug, the stranger it got. I'm Dr. Naomi Callan, an archaeologist with the State Preservation Office. 2 weeks ago, we were called to Black Ridge Mountain after seismic scans showed what looked like a buried structure near an old mining site. The sheriff's department wanted to make sure it wasn't some forgotten shaft before a developer bought the land, but from the first day I knew it wasn't man-made. The ground above it was packed with layers of smooth, circular stones, each one etched with symbols, too old to be Cherokee or Creek. They were arranged in a spiral that narrowed toward the center, like a drain. My assistant Reggie joked that it looked like a burial mound for giants. I laughed at first, but by the second night I stopped laughing, because the forest wouldn't stay quiet. We'd camped near the site to save time. Every night around 2 a.m., the ground seemed to pulse, not shake, not quake, but breathe. The tent walls would lift and settle, as if the earth beneath us was expanding and contracting. Reggie said it was underground water shifting. But I've worked sites on 5 continents. Nothing moves like that. On the 3rd morning, we broke through. A hollow space about 15 feet down, large enough to crawl into. It smelled like wet iron and something sweet, like decaying flowers. Reggie went first, his headlamp beam vanishing into the dark. I followed, and when I reached the bottom, I realized we were standing inside a perfect stone dome. The walls were carved with human shapes, hundreds of them, all facing inward toward a single altar made of black rock. Each figure's face had been worn smooth, except for their mouths, which were wide open. Reggie whispered, "They're screaming." We found a small pool at the center. The water inside was perfectly still, even when we touched it. I dipped my hand in to collect a sample, and my skin prickled instantly. Not burning, not cold, just wrong. That night, Reggie started mumbling in his sleep. I woke up to hear him whispering the same 3 words over and over. "It's underneath us." By dawn, he was gone. His sleeping bag lay empty, his boots missing, and his flashlight pointed straight toward the dig. I called for him until my throat was raw. No answer. When I climbed back into the chamber to look for him, I found something new. The water in the pool had turned cloudy, and in the center floated one of our headlamps. The light flickered faintly, blinking in 3s. 3 flashes, pause, 3 flashes. I thought it was Morse code, maybe SOS, until I noticed the pattern carved into the wall behind it. 3 interlocking spirals, the same design found on Weller's badge. I should have left then, but curiosity kept me there. I filmed everything, marking notes, samples, timestamps. Around 11 p.m., I heard it. A low, rhythmic hum echoing through the chamber. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. The carvings seemed to move under the light, the mouths opening wider, the stone warping like soft clay. Then I saw Reggie. He was standing knee-deep in the pool, motionless. His head tilted back, eyes rolled white. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. I called his name. The moment I stepped closer, the hum stopped. Then the water surface broke, dozens of pale hands reaching up from beneath him. They weren't solid, not fully like smoke-given form. They pulled him under silently. No splash, no struggle, just gone. I ran. When I reached the surface, the forest was glowing faintly blue, a light that came from nowhere and everywhere. My compass spun uselessly. I drove down the mountain without looking back. 2 days later, I returned with a state team. The hole had collapsed. The stones above it were gone, replaced by flat earth as if the mound had sealed itself. The seismic scans now show nothing. No hollow chamber. No void, just solid rock. But I still have the footage. In one frame, just before the camera cuts, there's a reflection on the pool's surface, a tall figure standing beside me, even though I was alone. Its face is blurred, but its mouth is wide open. And from the audio track, a whisper loops faintly. You dug too deep. The first time I heard the hooves, I thought it was thunder, a slow, distant rhythm rolling across the valley long before dawn. But the sky was clear, the air was still, and the sound was coming from the woods. I'm Ayan, a wildlife researcher working with the Regional Preservation Office. A few months back, I got assigned to study unusual animal migration near the base of Black Ridge Mountain. Lately, the herds had been moving strangely. Patterns that didn't match any season or food cycle. Locals said the nilgai had returned. I'd heard the name before, blue bulls, sacred in parts of India, said to walk between worlds. But this was Georgia. There shouldn't have been any here. Then one misty morning I saw them. 5 of them, tall, gray-blue, silent as stone, standing in a perfect circle on the far side of the clearing. The fog hung low, wrapping around their legs. They weren't grazing. They weren't moving, just circling, slow and deliberate, around something I couldn't see. My first instinct was to grab my camera, but the second I lifted it, one of them stopped mid-step. It turned its head toward me. Its eyes were almost human. I froze. The others stopped too, all facing me now, their hooves sinking into the damp earth in unison. That's when I saw what was in the center of their circle. A skull, human. It rested perfectly upright on the ground, clean and pale like it had been waiting for them. I stumbled back, but the nearest bull took a slow, heavy step forward. Its mouth opened slightly, and a sound came out, a low, trembling note that wasn't quite a moo, more like a chant. The others joined in, forming a rhythmic hum that seemed to vibrate through the trees, and then all at once they stopped. The forest fell silent again, but something about the air felt heavy, almost electric. I turned and ran back toward camp, the echo of those hooves following me long after the sound had faded. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the skull, those eyes, that impossible circle. I finally drifted off sometime past midnight, only to wake up to the same sound again, the hooves. They were closer this time. I went to the window, heart hammering. There they were again, right at the edge of the forest behind the cabin. 5 figures, blue-gray under the moonlight, circling the backyard. And then I saw it, the skull again, resting right where the fire pit had been. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The second the beam hit the clearing, the bulls froze. Their heads turned toward me in eerie synchrony. The air filled with that hum again. But this time it was louder, deep enough to rattle the glass windows behind me. The ground beneath my feet began to tremble, not like an earthquake, but like something massive moving below the surface. And then I saw movement behind the bulls, the forest parting, the trees bending outward. A shape, tall and indistinct, stepped through the mist. It looked human at first, until the light hit its face. There was no face, just a smooth black surface like obsidian. The bulls backed away slowly, lowering their heads. The shape raised one hand and the humming stopped instantly. Then, in a voice that wasn't human, I heard it speak, not out loud, but inside my head. "We remember your face." I ran. I don't even remember locking the door. But I remember the silence afterward, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound deafening. The next morning, I went back out. The skull was gone. The ground where the bulls had stood was scorched in perfect circles. The grass singed black. I reported everything to my supervisor, but he told me to take time off. Said I was overworked, probably hallucinating from lack of sleep. Maybe he would have been right if not for the footage on my trail cam. It caught only one frame before the camera fried. 5 blue bulls standing perfectly still, the tall dark figure standing in the middle. And on the ground before it, not a skull this time, but a familiar artifact. A black spiral-carved stone. The same one Dr. Naomi Callan described before she disappeared. Now I hear the hooves again sometimes when I'm alone, in my apartment, in parking lots, even when the air conditioner clicks on. Always slow, always steady, and I can't help but wonder if they're circling again. Not for the dead this time, but for me. I moved 3 states away from Black Ridge Mountain, thinking distance would keep me safe. But the sound followed me. I first noticed it on my 3rd night in the new apartment, a little basement unit beneath a row of old brick houses. It was quiet, cheap, and far from the forest. That was all I wanted. Then, as I lay in bed around 2 a.m., I heard it. A whistle. Soft, wandering, tuneless, coming from the vent above my head. At first I thought it was my neighbor. Maybe someone humming while they worked late. But it went on for nearly an hour, never breaking, never pausing for a breath. The same low, airy note, rising and falling in a rhythm that set my teeth on edge. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I asked the landlord if someone lived above me. "No," she said. "That unit's been empty for months." I tried to shrug it off. But the next night it started again. This time it wasn't just a whistle, it was a whisper. Not words exactly, but the cadence of words. It moved through the vents like someone was walking back and forth above me, dragging their fingers along the walls. I remembered the stories from the mountain, the whistling man, the murmuring voices, the circles. I told myself it was stress, an echo of old fear. Then on the 4th night, my neighbor knocked on my door. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Her eyes were wide, sleepless. She lived 2 units over, no shared vents, and yet she heard the whistle too. "It's like..." She hesitated. "It's like it's inside the walls." We compared notes. Same time, same sound, always around 2 a.m. By the 6th night, it escalated. I woke to find my window wide open. I never opened that window. It's painted shut. On the sill was a small stack of stones. 3 flat pebbles balanced perfectly on top of one another. I brushed them off onto the floor. When I looked again, they were back on the sill. That's when I saw it, a reflection in the glass. Not me, not anyone I recognized. Just a tall black figure standing behind me in the room. Its face was a smear of static. I spun around, nothing. But the whistle turned into a hum, low, heavy, vibrating through the floorboards. The same hum Naomi described under the mountain. I called the landlord the next morning, told her something was wrong. She came down herself to check. We found the window nailed shut from the outside. We found no stones, no sign of forced entry. She left shaking her head, saying she'd get pest control to check the vents. But that night it came again, louder, closer. I put on headphones, turned the volume up, tried to drown it out. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the bulls, their hooves, their eyes, their circles. When I woke, my apartment smelled like wet iron and flowers. And on my kitchen table was a black stone, etched with 3 spirals. I don't go to work anymore. I can't. Every time I step outside, the wind carries the whistle back to me. On buses, in grocery stores, on empty sidewalks. It's not just a sound now. It's a presence. Like it's following, watching, waiting. Sometimes at night I catch myself whistling back. The same note without even realizing it. Last night, I woke to a new sound, hooves, faint, echoing up from the basement floor. And in my dream, a voice finally formed words. We remember your face. I don't think distance matters anymore. I think once you've seen it, once it's seen you, you're marked. I'm starting to wonder if the mountain isn't a place at all, but a door. And somehow I opened it. When the fires started on the ridge, most people thought it was lightning. But I knew better. I'd been watching the weather reports for days. No storms, no clouds, just dry air and the faint smell of smoke rolling down the valley. By then, the whispers and whistling had already spread across 3 towns. I'd heard from my Jan, the researcher, who first saw the blue bulls, that something in the forest was waking up. He sent me one last message before he vanished. It's forming a circle again. So I drove back to Black Ridge. I shouldn't have. The highway leading there was closed, blocked by state rangers and a handful of silent men in black uniforms. They didn't wear badges. They just watched as I turned down an old service road, pretending not to notice me slip through the fog. The deeper I went, the stranger the air became. The smoke wasn't from fire. It was cold, like mist. Every breath felt heavy, metallic. I reached the clearing just before dawn. The old research site was gone, nothing left but ash, blackened trees and a ring burned deep into the soil. The circle. It was wider now, stretching nearly 50 feet across. And in the center, half buried in the dirt, was something that shouldn't exist, a stone altar covered in carvings that looked almost alive. The symbols pulsed faintly, like veins beneath skin. I recognized one of the carvings instantly, the spiral, the same one that had appeared in my apartment weeks ago. Then the air shifted. A hum started low in the ground, just like before, but stronger, almost like the earth itself was breathing. That's when I saw the first one. A nilgai stepped out of the haze, its coat glowing faintly blue under the moonlight. Then another, and another. They moved silently, forming a perfect circle around the altar. But this time there weren't 5. There were 13. Each one turned its head in unison, their dark eyes reflecting the faint light from the ground. Then they began to bow, slow, synchronized, their hooves thudding softly in the dirt. From the center of the circle, the altar split. A crack opened, deep and narrow, and from it came a wind that reeked of sulfur and rot. The bulls didn't move. And then, from that crack, something climbed out. It wasn't human. Not anymore. Its body shimmered like liquid shadow, tall and thin, its head featureless except for 2 curved ridges where eyes should be. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body locked. The hum grew louder until it felt like my bones would break. Then the voice came. The door remembers you. The ground beneath me split open. I fell forward, catching myself on the edge of the pit. Beneath the surface, I could see shapes moving. Faces, hundreds of them, whispering from beneath layers of black stone. Some were screaming. Some were laughing. Some were mine. The creature turned its head toward me, and I finally understood. The spiral wasn't just a mark, it was a path. Every person who'd seen it, every sound, every whisper, was part of the same pattern leading back here, back to this moment. The bulls began to dissolve, their bodies turning into gray ash that drifted upward like smoke. The creature raised one hand, and I felt the pull, like gravity in reverse, dragging me toward the light at the center of the altar. I screamed, clawing at the dirt. My fingers brushed something solid, a pendant buried just beneath the ash. Naomi's, the one she'd written about in her notes. I gripped it tight and shouted her name. The air cracked like lightning. The spiral flared once, blindingly bright, and then everything went silent. When I woke up, it was morning. The forest was gone, nothing but a field of gray dust stretching for miles. The circle had burned itself into the earth, a perfect black scar visible even from the sky, and standing at the far edge of it was the creature, watching me. still and silent. Then slowly, it raised its hand again and pointed toward the horizon, toward the towns, the cities, the people who had heard the whistle. The curse wasn't ending. It was spreading. The station had been abandoned for years. Most of the equipment was outdated, rusted, coated with dust. But somehow the signal had turned itself on again. That's what the local sheriff told me when he called. Said the emergency broadcast tower on Black Ridge was transmitting on its own at exactly 3 a.m. every night, the same hour the fires began. No one could trace it. No one could shut it down. So I volunteered. The road up was a wreck of fallen trees and blackened stone. Nothing grew there anymore. Even the birds refused to cross the tree line. The smell of smoke still lingered, but the air felt colder than it should have, like the fire had burned the warmth out of the mountain itself. The tower loomed ahead, tall and crooked against the red sky. The metal hummed faintly, carrying the sound through my chest like a heartbeat. I forced the door open, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, the power light was already on, but the generator wasn't running. Old radio decks lined the walls, each one flickering with static. The screen on the main transmitter flashed a single phrase over and over. "Do not listen." I almost laughed. Too late for that. Then the static shifted, and through the noise I heard it, faint, distant, familiar. "Help me." The same voice that started all of this, the same one the ranger heard years ago. I leaned closer. The words came again, but this time, layered with others, whispers stacking on top of each other, rising until they became one sound, a hum. I grabbed the microphone, tried to speak. "This is..." But the signal cut me off. The speakers screamed, a high, sharp tone that made the lights flicker. Then, suddenly, the monitors switched on by themselves. Footage began to play, grainy, black and white. The first image showed the blue bulls circling a glowing shape. Then came the forest rangers, faces pale, staring at something just out of frame. Then Naomi's pendant, buried in ash. Then, me. It was me, standing right there in that same room, staring at the screen. Only I hadn't moved yet. My reflection blinked before I did. Then the voice changed. It was deeper now, echoing through every speaker in the room. "The mountain is awake. You brought them back." The signal burst again and the screen went dark, except for the spiral. The same symbol etched into stone, drawn in ash, burned into my memories. It spun slowly, hypnotically, until the edges of my vision blurred. Outside, thunder rolled, though the sky was clear. The ground trembled beneath the tower. Through the window I saw them, figures walking out of the tree line. Dozens of them, covered in soot and shadow. Some wore ranger uniforms. Some looked like the missing. Their eyes glowed faintly blue. They gathered at the base of the tower, staring up. Then one of them spoke. "It's time." The static exploded. The spiral grew faster on the screen until it became a blinding white light. The floor split beneath me, metal groaning. I tried to run, but the hum grew louder, swallowing the air. And then I realized the signal wasn't just broadcasting anymore. It was recording. It was using me. The tower's speakers roared to life, projecting my own breathing, my voice, my heartbeat across the valley. The sound spread like a wave, through the burned forest, down the mountains, into the towns below. Every radio, every phone, every television flickered on. Everywhere people began to hear it, the same voice that started everything. "Help me." Only now it wasn't a call for help. It was a command. The last thing I saw before the light took me was the reflection of my face on the cracked screen. My mouth moved, but it wasn't my words coming out. "We remember your name." The transmission cut out at 3:27 a.m. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, no one who's gone up the mountain has come back. But sometimes late at night, if you turn your radio to an empty frequency, you'll hear a faint hum beneath the static. And if you listen long enough, you might hear someone whisper your name back. You've heard the stories. Now they've heard you. If you felt the chill, leave a comment. And remember, this is Scary Plugin, where nightmares never log off.